This story is about a woman who believed hard work would protect her place in her own family. While her father was battling cancer, she kept his company running. She handled the pressure, the decisions, the responsibility. 24 hours after the funeral, she came home to a locked gate. Her mother and sister had already decided her fate. Her bags were on the sidewalk. The house was no longer hers. The company she had carried for years was handed to her sister as the new CEO. They believed she had no power left, no options, no fight. What they didn't realize was that her father had already made one quiet decision before he passed. And when that decision came to light, it didn't just surprise them, it changed everything. Now I'm going to tell you her story, in her own words. My name is Emily, and for most of my life, I lived by a simple rule. If you work hard enough and sacrifice enough, the people you love will eventually see you. I thought love was a ledger, a series of deposits I made every time I skipped a vacation to fix a logistical nightmare at the warehouse, or every time I wiped the sweat from my father's forehead as the cancer ate away at his strength. But I was wrong. To my mother, Diane, and my sister, Sarah, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was an unpaid insurance policy. Miller's Logistics wasn't just a business, it was my father's lifeblood. We had 40 drivers, a fleet of aging but reliable rigs, and a payroll of $200,000 that didn't care if my heart was breaking. While Dad's health declined, I was the one in the office at 5 a.m., dealing with late shipments and rising fuel costs. By the time the sun went down, I wasn't going home to rest. I was going to the hospital, or later, to the hospice wing we set up in the living room. The reality of stage 4 pancreatic cancer is a smell you never forget, a mix of antiseptic, iron, and fading hope. I paid the $1,200 a week nursing fees out of my own savings because the business accounts were tight. Meanwhile, Sarah was at the club. I'd be sitting in the dark by Dad's bed counting his shallow breaths, and my phone would buzz with a notification. Another $400 charge at a downtown rooftop bar. Another emergency credit card payment I had to cover so the family name wouldn't be dragged through the mud. I remember one Tuesday vividly. I was at the pharmacy, my eyes stinging from exhaustion, trying to figure out how to pay for Dad's new oxygen tanks. My phone chimed. It was a photo Sarah posted, her and Mom clinking mimosas at a $60 per plate brunch, captioned, "Family Time." They were laughing while I was crying over a copay. Dad would grab my hand, his voice a ghost of what it used to be, and whisper, "I see you, Em. I see everything." I thought he was just being sweet. I didn't realize he was actually making a plan. The funeral at Oaklawn Cemetery was a blur of gray skies and performative grief. I watched my sister, Sarah, dab at dry eyes through a designer veil, while my mother, Diane, clung to the arm of a family friend, acting the part of the tragic widow for the cameras she'd invited. I was the one who actually felt the weight of the dirt hitting the casket. I felt like half of my soul was being buried with the only man who ever truly looked at me. I expected us to go home, sit in the quiet of Dad's study, and finally grieve as a family. But when I pulled my car into the driveway of the house I'd lived in for 30 years, something was wrong. The gate was shut, not just shut, locked with a heavy-duty chain I'd never seen before. I walked up to the front porch, my heart hammering against my ribs. Before I could even reach for my keys, the door swung open. Mom stood there, flanked by Sarah, who was already holding a glass of expensive champagne. At my feet sat 2 battered suitcases and a black trash bag bulging with my clothes. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "It's an intervention, Emily," Sarah sneered, leaning against the doorframe. "Dad is gone, and frankly, we're tired of your martyr act. You've spent years acting like you own the place just because you did a little paperwork." "A little paperwork?" I felt the heat rise in my chest. "I ran the company while you were blacked out in VIP booths. I paid for Dad's medicine." Mom stepped forward, her face a mask of cold indifference. "You were a glorified maid, Emily. You stayed because you had nowhere else to go. But Sarah and I have decided to take the business in a more modern direction. Since Dad didn't leave a signed will on the kitchen table, the house reverts to me as his legal spouse, and I've appointed Sarah as the new CEO of Miller's Logistics. You're kicking me out? Now? He's been in the ground for 2 hours. You've always been so obsessed with work, Emily, Mom said, reaching out to push the trash bag off the porch with the toe of her shoe. Go find a job and a life. We don't need you anymore. The door slammed shut. The click of the deadbolt echoed like a gunshot. I stood on the sidewalk of my own home, surrounded by my life in plastic bags, while my sister's laughter drifted through the upstairs window. I spent the next 3 days on my best friend Chloe's couch, staring at the ceiling until my eyes burned. My bank balance was a joke, $42.16. I had liquidated everything to keep Dad comfortable, thinking the estate would settle the score. Now, I was 30 years old, homeless and technically unemployed. I felt like a fool who had played a game where the rules were changed the moment I started winning. On the 4th morning, my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson, my father's attorney, and the only man Dad trusted with the ugly side of the business. His voice was heavy, vibrating with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Emily," he said, "I heard what happened at the house. Your father, he wasn't blind, honey. He knew exactly who Diane and Sarah were. He knew they were circling like vultures while he was still breathing. I need you in my office. Now." When I walked into his wood-paneled office, Henderson didn't offer me coffee. He pushed a thick manila folder across the desk. Inside was a document dated 2 months before Dad's passing. "This is the will," I whispered. "No," Henderson corrected, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. "That is a deed of gift. Your father knew that wills can be contested in court for years. He didn't want you stuck in a legal battle with your mother. So while he was still of sound mind, he legally transferred the family home and 100% of the shares of Miller's Logistics to you as a living gift. It's already been recorded with the county." I felt the air leave my lungs. "So the house, the company, it's all mine?" "Everything," Henderson said. "Legally, Diane and Sarah are squatters in your house and trespassers in your office. We can serve the eviction papers right now." I looked at the documents, then at the photo of Dad on Henderson's wall. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. "No," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "Sarah wants to be the CEO? Let's let her try. I want to see exactly how much rope she'll use to hang herself before I pull the trigger." I spent the next 3 weeks in a state of strategic disappearance. I blocked Mom and Sarah's numbers. Not out of hurt, but because silence is the loudest weapon you can use against a narcissist. I didn't call the warehouse. I didn't warn the vendors. I simply vanished and watched the dominoes fall through the lens of Sarah's public Instagram. It didn't take long for the rot to set in. Sarah's first move as CEO wasn't to check the freight schedules or meet with the union reps. It was to spend $50,000 of the company's reserve tax fund on a leased Porsche Taycan and a New Era launch party at the Pierre Hotel. She posted photos of herself popping champagne in the boardroom, my father's boardroom, while wearing a $3,000 suit charged to a company line of credit she didn't realize I was monitoring. Then came the arrogance. She fired Mike, our most loyal driver who had been with Dad for 25 years, because he didn't fit the brand aesthetic when he showed up for a meeting in his work flannels. When Mike left, 6 other drivers walked out with him. The supply chain I had spent a decade building began to snap. By week 3, the notice of foreclosure alert started hitting the business portal. Sarah had missed 2 massive mortgage payments on the main warehouse because she'd diverted the cash to marketing consultants, who were really just her clubbing friends. I sat in Chloe's kitchen, watching the digital bank alerts pile up like a mountain of debt. Sarah was desperate. I saw her post a hustle culture quote about making big moves, but the reality arrived in a panicked email from a hard money lender. Sarah was trying to take out a predatory $300,000 loan to cover the payroll she'd blown. The collateral she offered? The family house. She was about to sign away a property she didn't even own. It was time to go home. I walked into Miller's Logistics on a Tuesday morning, the air thick with the smell of failure. The office was quiet. No phones ringing, no drivers joking, just Sarah sitting at Dad's desk and Mom draped in a new fur coat that smelled of desperation. They were huddled over a document with a man in a sharp suit, the lender. "Emily," Mom gasped, clutching her pearls, "you can't just barge in here. We told you, you're not part of this family anymore." "I'm not here for a family reunion, Diane," I said, dropping the manila folder onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud, right on top of Sarah's predatory loan agreement. Sarah sneered, grabbing the pen. "You're too late. I'm signing this loan, and I'm taking this company to the moon. Leave before I call security." "Call them," I challenged, leaning in. "But before you do, read page 4. You're trying to use the Miller estate as collateral, but you can't pledge what you don't own. Dad didn't die intestate. He gave me the house and this company as a living gift 2 months before he passed. Every cent you've spent from the tax fund, that's embezzlement. Every contract you've signed, it's void." The color drained from Sarah's face as the loan officer snatched the folder. He glanced at the certified deed and stood up immediately. "This meeting is over," he snapped. "Don't ever call my firm again." Behind me, the door opened. Mr. Henderson walked in with 2 sheriff's deputies. I looked at my mother, whose mouth was hanging open, and then at Sarah, who was trembling. "You have 1 hour to pack your things from my house," I said, my voice as cold as the dirt at Oak Lawn. "And Sarah? The board is filing suit for the missing tax reserves this afternoon. I hope the Porsche was worth it." I watched them being escorted out, sobbing and screaming about betrayal. When the door finally closed, I sat in Dad's chair. The business was in shambles and the debt was mountain high, but as I looked at his photo on the desk, I finally felt the peace I'd been searching for. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was the owner, and I was finally home. Emily's journey from a sidewalk suitcase to reclaiming her father's legacy is a powerful reminder of the strength found in silence and strategy. But now that the dust has settled, I want to hear from you. What did you learn from this family's downfall? Was the mother just as guilty as Sarah, or was she simply a victim of her own favoritism? Let us know in the comments. Please remember, the story you just watched was a fictional dramatization created specifically for societal reform and educational awareness. We share these intense scenarios to shine a light on dark realities like financial abuse and family betrayal so that you can recognize the warning signs and avoid repeating these toxic behaviors in your own life. Justice was served for Emily, but in the real world, prevention is always better than revenge. If you found value in this lesson today, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join our community for daily stories of justice and truth.